Alright, so I took about a month off from the game to focus on real life things, and this 21 Tyrannical Halls was one of my first keys back. So we'll see if I can still manage to heal my way through a key that's a push key for my team. So to start, I'm focusing on helping the tank get this first pull grouped up. We're going to be popping Bloodlust and then just trying to AoE down all these mobs. I want to get my damage out as soon as possible because I want to be taking advantage of Wild Hunt tactics and First Strike. So I get into an Eclipse and send the Convoke, end up getting a huge Moon, which feels good. After I get my damage out, I want to help the tank manage all of the dangerous parts of this pull. So it's mostly going to be the dogs, and so helping peel for the tank, so he's not just tanking all the bleeds and all the melees from the dogs. And then also just healing through the Obliterator's casts. The Wicked Bolts deal a lot of damage to the tank, and if too many of those don't get kicked, the tank is going to be having a bad time. So I want to keep the tank fairly healthy throughout the later half of these pulls. I feel like there's a difference between how to think about healing a Blood DK versus the other tanks. With other tanks, the healer-tank relationship is such that the tank needs to manage their damage taken over time, and then the healer's job is to keep them alive through whatever damage can't be mitigated. With Blood DKs, they have some mitigation with like Rune Tap and Anti-Magic Shield and things like that, but their main mitigation is their healing through Death Strike. So the way I think of my role in the tank healer relationship in the case of healing a Blood DK is less of keeping them alive. It's really their job to keep themselves alive, and instead my goal is to be the one that smooths out their damage intake by providing a bit of healing over time. And then maybe even more important than the healing, there's probably some pulls where I just don't even need to heal the tank at all, and instead we should be focusing on how we can manage kiting and the tank's damage taken that way. So I think I actually misplay all of the shards. Maybe I do an okay job on the last shard, but here I'm kind of splitting my attention between two things. I am thinking I want to try to get my damage out, but I also need to be ramping for the shard's thrash, and I don't really do either of those things all that well. At the same time, my tank is running out of options for ways to mitigate damage, and I don't really notice this until much later. I also should have been, I think, saving my Iron Bark for this. I probably could have predicted that the tank was going to run out of tools if I had done a quick check of the available cooldowns. But instead I ended up using the Iron Bark at the very beginning of the pull, thinking it would buy me some time to get my damage out, which I didn't really take advantage of. One tip here is, especially as a healer, this is pretty useful. You can line of sight this Thrash around the corner. Your DPS players probably shouldn't be doing this because they'll be losing damage, and it's not strictly necessary. But as a healer, if you're not going to be doing a ton of damage, like if you've already used your cooldowns or you need to focus on healing your team, then just stepping around that corner so you take no damage from the Thrash can get you a bit of breathing room there. So healing a Blood DK through Verruth is actually kind of tough, since, again, the Blood DK's main form of mitigation is their healing, and Verruth is going to reduce the Blood DK's healing. You're going to end up using a lot of cooldowns here, so I end up using Innervate on the first bleed, and then bombing Regrowths into the tank, and then end up using a single target Flourish on the second bleed. Yeah, so the last one ended up being okay. I think we were maybe had oh, it looks like he had a Rune Tap perhaps. We were able to mitigate that a bit. Gonna skip ahead here. So here I'm going to try to steal a quick drink and get my mana up before this next shard. This ends up being a bit of a mistake because it ends up causing the same problem that the last shard had, where I'm not ramped on the tank enough, so he's taking huge damage. I think we all underestimated how much damage he was going to take. I didn't get my damage out, and I didn't ramp appropriately for the Thrash. The tank ends up dying, but has a Soul Stone, so he's able to instantly de-res himself. But now he's like kind of running around like a crazy person trying to get his mitigation up. He has his dancing, there's like Bone Shield or whatever that he has to build up charges for, and all the while we have all these curses that are going out, and Spiteful are starting to spawn and are meleeing our rogue and running after our warlock. It's kind of chaos, but we end up making it out okay, mostly because our mage and warlock are doing outrageous damage, and this painful pull is not going to last too much longer. So now we're going to start clearing trash out on our way down to the third shard. We also end up killing Sagadon, which I think we should be trying to skip if possible, because the last boss has they have the statues that they're going to throw, but there's no other physical damage that's going out, and you have to dodge the statues anyway. They're going to one-shot you on a 21 Tyrannical, no matter whether you kill Sagadon or not. It doesn't really matter. So we should definitely be skipping him for time. I think we just don't have a route where we clear out enough of this courtyard near Halkias to give us enough space to like drop all the shards of glass and be able to keep moving throughout the fight. We end up using the space where Sagadon is standing currently to manage all the area denial that Halkias has. So I think that ends up being a not really a problem for time, but on a higher key it would definitely be a problem. So we should figure out a better route. Yeah, I'm gonna skip through Sagadon. We've seen him in a bunch of other videos, and I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with him by now. One nice thing about getting this self-healing buff power from Sagadon is that it lets you be one of the people to double soak beams on the last boss. We'll talk about that when we get there, but having a tank and one person with a defensive soak all of the beams ends up being a lot less healing that you need to put out. So you having 50% increased self-healing all the time ends up meaning that you can always double soak beams. I think here I'm talking with the tank, trying to figure out if we should be using Ursals or what the plan is. I think he is just trying to drop stacks of Necrotic. We're also down to the point where we've got just these two bears, and they're like permanently slowed from our Frost Mage, and so we're not super worried about them. But I think this last shard is a lot smoother than the other two. I think a big part of that is because we don't have any groundskeepers to pull here. Those groundskeepers were ending up stacking up a lot of necrotic on the tank, and so it meant that he was needing to blow through a lot of defensive cooldowns. I'm also doing a better job of focusing on ramping the team and doing healing instead of trying to split my attention between damage and healing. You can see my damage here is pretty low. I mean, the cleaved Sunfire and then spreading a couple Moonfires around is okay damage, but it's a lot less than if I were to get into an Eclipse and actually send the Convoke. So, but this one felt a lot more stable, a lot more predictable. It just overall felt better than the others. Alright, so next we're going to clear out this courtyard area, and So this pull is kind of like some of the others we've seen before. It's, you know, obliterators that we want to kick as much as possible. The Gargans are going to be stacking up the bleed, so we'll need to help the tank manage his kiting. One thing we haven't talked about are these Dark Blades. They have a frontal that the tank should be dodging and also pointing away from the team, and you want to be looking out for melee DPS that are standing in front of that. On a high enough fortified key, it's just going to one-shot them, but you might be able to see it coming and either use Typhoon to knock them away, or just be ready to quickly top players that get hit by that frontal. But people should be trying to avoid it if possible. So this is a trick where you can get 2 Loyal Stoneborns. You have your Venthyr player just group them up and then spam the Loyal Stoneborn tame button. It ends up being a pretty easy way to get 2 of these Stoneborns, which are awesome for single target DPS. So this is a boss fight where I literally don't think I heal the tank after the start. Like, I want to make sure that he's kind of propped up and he's able to get his mitigation and resources pooled up and ready to go. But after the start of this, I don't think I actually really do much healing at all. Yeah, that and this right here, I just use Wild Charge to get over the glass shards. That's like a pretty easy way to quickly reposition if you you need to you know, get away from those shards. Our tank kind of moves this boss in a slightly unpredictable way, but overall his strategy is a good one, trying to get the boss to do his slam, and then, oh, poor Rogue. Oh, this is actually hilarious. The Rogue dies, we B-res, he accepts it into the beam and dies again. He's actually mad right now. Anyway, the tank's trying to get the boss to drop these shards of glass on the ground and then position the boss over those shards when he's going to do the beams, making sure that there's like enough of a gap between all of these that we can move around them safely. So the shards deal damage when you stand at them, and they slow you as well, so that could be pretty dangerous when those beams are going on. I think our tank made another mistake with his mitigation, but so I had to do a little bit of healing there, but it wasn't too bad. I think he was kind of flustered after this Rogue dies twice. That was kind of rough. But now we're at this point where we're stable. We're gonna just keep living. I am now trying to deal as much damage as possible because, you know, one of our DPS is gone, and it's not ideal. But yeah, we end up killing this guy and, you know, getting the res on the Rogue and moving on with our lives. It's not too bad. It's just a little slow. So yeah, I'm actually going to skip ahead. I think you get what's going on here, and we can talk about the rest of the dungeon. Alright, so we have, I think, one more pull before we get to Echelon. The key number before you pull Echelon is 80% count. There's exactly 20% count in the remainder of the dungeon, so you want to make sure you're getting to that 80% count before going into to fight Echelon. So we're just clearing out these guys at the bottom of the stairs. Again, these are all mobs that we've seen before, the Dark Blades with the frontals, and then the 2 obliterators. We want to be kicking those casts as much as possible. This is another case where I am, you know, looking to get all of the dispels of the curse and try to save my mage some globals. Yeah, so we end up just using Shroud and getting up here, getting past all this trash, and then we're able to start Echelon right away. Yeah, so with Echelon, there's a few things to look out for. The first is trying to bait the blood pool to be away from the middle of the room. Those blood pools are going to be denying area throughout the fight, and you want to try to manage them as best you can. The next is making sure you're ramped on everyone for these Stone Fiend guys, because when they die, they deal damage to everyone. And then when this leap is happening, you want to make sure that you are trying to dispel the curse off the person who gets targeted. This way they can use some ability to avoid the damage. Unfortunately, there our rogue got hit. He was kind of stuck in the middle, right next to all of those like little mobs that we're trying to kill with that leap, so he ended up getting hit. Any player that gets hit is going to get a curse. Is it a curse? I don't remember. It's some nasty debuff that is a damage over time. It's very dangerous, so you're going to be looking out for that. The tank is generally not in too much danger. On Necrotic Week, the biggest problem is if you kick all of these Stone Fiends, they're going to end up meleeing your tank, and he's going to get a lot of Necrotic stacks. So here's another case where I dispel the mage, although I think he dispelled himself. Our rogue also gets hit again. I end up giving him Iron Bark here, I think, yeah. So I don't have my my Cenarian Ward. So we keep the rogue stabilized. Another tip, when these guys spawn, try to come into the middle of the room, because they're going to be aggroed on the tank initially, but if they patrol through you as they're kind of running into the middle, they'll switch their aggro to you, and so you want to try to avoid that if you can. You're in kind of rough shape here. I think I end up using a Resto. Yeah, I end up Resto Convoking, because multiple players have gotten hit by the leap and have been in pretty big danger. I'm also thinking we probably have one more round of... Yeah, one more round of the small ads coming, and I want to save my my Tranquility for that. Yeah, you can see this rogue with this debuff is taking huge damage. It is not good to get hit by that. You want to try to avoid that if you can. As a druid, you can just wild charge to one of your teammates and get away, or you can use Soul Shape or switch into Travel Form and wild charge. That way, any of these options are available. It's pretty easy to avoid.
Lurks nearby. Expel it with haste.
So this guy, I think we've talked about him a lot. He's a great Tormented Lieutenant to kill because he has a lot of good powers for DPS players, and he also has, I think, my favorite power as a Resto Druid, which is the haste buff. One tip for him is try to stand kind of far away. You can try to bait these flame patches away from your team, which will just let your casters stand still and cast while you're doing the healing. You can easily move as a Resto Druid because most of your spells are instant cast, but your DPS are not in the same boat, so you want to try to help them as much as you can. Yeah, I love this haste power. 12% extra haste is kind of crazy. We end up doing a double pull here, where our tank goes in and grabs a bunch of the mobs from the next room and the boss room. So we have a pretty good sized pull here. One of the scary things about this pull is that there's 3 Gargans and 2 Houndmasters, and if the Houndmaster's buff is not cancelled, they're gonna do this this thing where they end up buffing all of these dogs. It's gonna give them, yeah, Loyal Beast, that's the one. That is going to double enrage them. They're gonna have 2 stacks of their enrage. These can't be allowed to touch your tank. So you have to do everything in your power to not let them touch your tank. One other thing here is this pull has a collector, which is putting out the Siphon Life. This is a magic dot that needs to get dispelled. There's also the Obliterators, which are going to be putting out the Curse. So in general, there's like a few pulls where you're going to have a mix of Obliterators and Collectors, and you're going to need to save your Dispel for the magic debuff. And then you're going to need another player to be Curse Dispelling. So you pretty much always want to have at least one Curse Dispel with you, either a Mage or Moonkin or Shaman. And yeah, that ends up being just really clutch. Yeah, so we end up skipping Oros, the Cold Boss. This guy is really easy to skip in here because he's just off to the side. You can just walk past him. Both him and Sagadon are pretty easy to manage for the last boss, so it's a good idea to skip them. This boss is actually like absolutely face roll. I pretty much only deal damage during this fight. I do a very small amount of tank healing, a very small amount of group healing, and otherwise I'm just here dealing damage. So it's kind of a fun fight in that, you know, you get to just be an extra DPS, but yeah, it's also like kind of a boring fight. Yeah, I guess one tip is you can position near the lanterns preemptively so that you don't need to move when the guy spawns. You should also try to bait the fountain swirlies away from your caster teammates for the same reason that you want to bait a lot of these kinds of mechanics. You know, you standing far away from them is going to mean that, you know, there's a decent chance that you'll get targeted and the swirly will not be anywhere near your teammate, so they can just stand still and cast. Yeah, this guy's pretty straightforward. Again, I think you get it. I'm gonna skip ahead to the next pull. So for this next pull, we want to be killing all of these kind of passive mobs in the pews. They're going to get converted by the Inquisitor into aggressive mobs. And every time he does that conversion, he's also going to full heal, right? So we want to be killing all of these mobs as quickly as we can. I actually like really enjoy this room with this Convoke Legendary because there's a good chance that you're going to get a Starfall, which I unfortunately don't get here, but you can pretty easily do like 15 or 20 KDPS in this room as a Resto Druid, which is a pretty unique situation for Resto Druids. So I think it's pretty fun. But we actually do a really good job of killing these like yellow mobs in the pews, and getting them all grouped up here. And I end up using Ursals because these manifestations of envy are going to be trying to, you know, fixate on random players and get out. We want to be trying to keep them all grouped up as best we can so they get cleaved down. We actually make pretty short work of this room. I'm pretty impressed with the team here. Yeah, speaking of team, I think one thing I want to talk about in a future video is how to go about forming teams in Mythic Plus. In general, the best way to climb is to push your own key, I've found. And forming groups is a crucial part of that. In a lot of cases, it doesn't really matter who you bring to your team as long as you have the core roles covered, of course. And to be clear, I think every class and comp is viable in the majority of levels of Mythic Plus. The meta comps are really only important at the very highest level, but I think there are a few principles that are worth following when you're forming teams that I'd like to share in a future video. So this guy's actually low-key kind of easy. You know, he's mostly doing tank damage for the majority of the fight, and not a lot of tank damage at that. There's only one exception to that, and it's the dot that he puts out. And then here, when he goes into the middle and pulls in all the statues, that's when he's going to be doing potentially group-wide damage. But if you get really close and stand inside his hitbox, you can actually soak 2 of these beans. And like I said before, the double healing on myself power from Sagadon is really helpful here. So like I'm able to just put out an outrageous amount of healing on myself, and our tank is you know, also able to keep himself alive. This dot that goes out is actually pretty dangerous. So it actually ramps up and deals more damage closer to the end of the dot. So you can see there that one tick, the final tick, was like 1/3 of the tank's HP. So that's pretty dangerous. He can actually completely block it with a well-timed anti-magic shield, but I don't think it can be spell reflected by warriors or things like that. So it's pretty dangerous, and you're going to have to put some attention into the tank. So again, just getting really close here, inside the hitbox. The tank drops his anti-magic zone, which definitely helps here. But yeah, being able to just double soak these and then really put the majority of the healing into myself, and then, you know, just keeping the... Ooh, this one was close. I kind of noticed that statue pointing at me a little late, so I end up using a soul shape to dodge it. But here you can see I'm again ramping on the tank just while he has this dot on him, because it's so dangerous. I barely dodged that one. That one was close. I think this whole time the tank in Discord is just begging people to dodge these statues, but we are pretty hyped at this point because it's our first 21 of the season, and I'm personally pretty proud of this one because I, you know, took that kind of long break and I'm like rusty as fuck. So it was, I felt like I noticed an improvement in my play, you know, from the beginning versus the end of the run. I felt like I kind of got into a groove and I was able to make it happen. So yeah, thanks for watching. This was a fun run, and I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what dungeon you want to see next, or if there's any other content that you think would be cool or interesting to check out. Alright, take it easy.